What's up, everybody? It's your man, MG Marcus Grant. And are you looking to stay up to date with the latest goings-on of your favorite, or maybe not so favorite NFL team? Well, how do you do that? You go directly to the source. Every week, Matty Kroll is doing just that with On the Beat, talking to beat reporters from across the National Football League. Be sure to check it out each and every week on 32-Bit.
Yo, what is going on, y'all? Y'all know who it is. Actually, no, you don't. I'm substituting and filling in for the lovely Miss Matty Kroll. She was unable to make it today. But as you guys have seen me before, you know who it is. It's your boy. It's your man. It's your host for today, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, checking in into the building. And as you guys already know, as I like to call them, I have another VIG with me. And if you don't already know what that means, it stands for very important guest. Today, joining me is Chargers boxing and NFL reporter, Mr. Gilbert Manzano there's like 3 different paper publications. So I'm going to just start with one, but with the Orange News Register. Gilbert, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Calvin. I know you, Calvin. We got to know each other before we got on and we started recording. So I feel like we're already close, man. Thank you for the nice introduction. And yeah, man, I'm ready here to talk about football or whatever you want to ask me, man. I'm ready.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, again, like I said before we got on air, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything, like I said, I did want to ask a couple of questions about you. So, ironically, as a football reporter, the college you attended, Cal State Northridge, right? They didn't have a football team. And so, but however, it is considered one of the more diverse schools in the nation. It's universally known as a music and a film school. I'm curious, though, what drew you to Cal State Northridge?
Yeah, I guess if I'm going to be honest, man, I wasn't the best student in high school, so I didn't have many options. I grew up in Pasadena, California. I got a couple Cal State offers, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was really into sports. I read the sports section every day, but I never thought of myself as to pursue a career in journalism. People told me I was a good writer in high school, but if it wasn't about sports and classes, I really didn't care. But maybe the topic was a teacher told me, "Hey, you can write about sports." I remember I wrote about the Malice at the Palace, the brawl with Ron Artest out there, and somebody told me I wrote a good story about it. Like I really broke it down, analysis. I'm like, hey, maybe I could try this for a career. So. Maybe I did a little digging. Cal State Northridge had a good journalism program, I guess, right? Because they really do. I learned a lot there working at the Daily Sundial. All my professors were really helpful. So if you're kind of in my situation, and not to kind of knock Cal State Northridge, you should go because it is for journalism. I think it's one of the top schools in the nation. So it worked out for me. Yeah, we have no football team, but like we like to say, we've been undefeated since like 1989. So there you go.
Okay, and so while we're on that subject, were there any other schools in consideration?
We got like the Cal State LA, like a Cal State Long Beach. So anything Cal State in Southern California, there was a few. So it wasn't too much digging, but once I figured out that journalism was a top thing at Cal State Northridge, I said, hey, I'll make the drive from the 210 freeway to 118, 30 minutes a day, and I made it work.
Hey, 30 minutes a day isn't too bad. I just wanted to say I could relate too. You were talking about how you didn't do the best in high school. Mm-hmm. I can kind of relate. Maybe that's not something you want to relate to, but hey, look where you're at now. So I guess that's really all that matters.
Hey, we all have different paths, man.
Hey, of course. It's not how you start; it's how you finish, right?
Exactly.
Not to say that you're anywhere near being finished,
no,
but just
going,
wanted to bring up a line. And again, I wanted to ask another question. So, before you started working for the Orange County Register, you also spent time working for the Las Vegas Review Journal. Yeah. You spent time covering the Raiders. You were covering boxing over there. You also spent 2 seasons as the breaking news editor for NFL.com. Talk to me about some of your favorite times, with those 2 different jobs, and do they compare to what you're doing now?
Calvin, I'm starting to think you found my resume somewhere. So you did your research there, your homework, you went back. But yeah, so for me, after graduating from Cal State Northridge, I did a lot of high school sports. I did a lot of community work with local small newspapers, and I kind of worked my way up. And I kept going through the whole high school scene for about 3 years. I'm like, okay, it's kind of a little repetitive for me. I got to try something new. So when I went to NFL.com, it was different. I wasn't a journalist on the field. I wasn't talking to anybody. I was in the desk, a cubicle, kind of the 9-to-5 life. But I learned how to break news there. Like when I think the first day for me, it was like 2014. Cal Cam Newton got into a car accident. Johnny Manziel was named the starter for the Browns. They're like, hey, Gilbert, this is all breaking news. You got to write a story real quick. You got 5 minutes to post. So I've never written a story that fast in my life. But you learn that you do a couple paragraphs. That's what people need nowadays. Just a couple graphs, get right to it, and then write a headline real quick. So I learned the fast pace. That was all fast paced breaking news. Keeping up to Twitter, keeping up to Ian Rappaport, seeing what those guys are doing, making sure you're attributing to the right person, like sources. All that was really important when I was working at NFL.com for a couple of years. So I really learned, like I really got in there, and I learned the fast pace. But the Las Vegas Review Journal, that was kind of the more traditional newspaper reporter kind of role, which that's what I meant for to do. I felt like that's my calling, is to be out in the field. I really liked the kind of desk work for a couple of years because I learned, but I needed to be out in the field. And it wasn't all football. I was covering, like you mentioned, boxing. I was ringside for Mayweather fights, Pacquiao. As you know, Calvin Pacquiao's your guy. So that was pretty cool to do all that. Like for me, growing up, Mexicans and Filipinos, we love boxing. So to be as a kid and watching these guys, these icons, and then going to Vegas and be ringside to cover them was pretty cool. And then the Raiders had the announcement from Oakland to Las Vegas, and they're like, "Hey, Gilbert, you covered the NFL. You worked at NFL.com. You know some football." I'm like, "Sure, I do." So I got to cover the Raiders move from Oakland to Las Vegas. It was a little weird. I was living in Las Vegas, flying every now and then to Oakland to kind of cover that relocation there. But it picked up from there, and I came back home to California to cover the Chargers for the Orange County Register and the LA Daily News.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you're doing a lot. It was the Orange County Register, like you said. And then there's also the LA Daily News.
Yeah, it's like 12 newspapers.
So are they all under one publication?
Yeah, that's kind of how it is nowadays with newspapers. Like if you're not called the LA Times or the New York Times, what these companies do, they kind of just buy a bunch of newspapers and put them into one group. So our company bought pretty much every newspaper in Southern California, not named LA Times. So you get the Long Beach Press Telegram. You got Riverside Enterprise. So we're from like Riverside to Pasadena to the Valley, Woodland Hills, and all that, to Orange County, obviously. So we're pretty much everywhere in SoCal.
And so you grew up in Pasadena, correct? And you grew up reading pretty much the same newspapers that you now write for, correct?
Yeah, that's kind of the cool thing. I got to stop and think sometimes, because I grew up reading these newspapers, for my hometown, Pasadena. And I when I was in college, when I really got serious about doing this, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. Like, maybe I could work here one day at Pasadena Star News. Because when I was picking up the newspaper, I was just reading to keep up with sports, because I was a sports fanatic. I would never thought about being a reporter, but I kind of just consume how to write a story, I guess, in my brain. So I always thank the Pasadena Star News for kind of getting me ready before I even knew it. So yeah, it's kind of a little surreal to work for your hometown newspaper.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. So one more personal question before we get into the whole football thing. Not to turn this into a race thing, but off the top of my head, I can only really count on one or two hands the amount of, I guess, brown skinned, right? Like people like us in the industry, including yourself, of course. So what kind of advice do you have for people like us looking to break into the industry? And is there anything you'd like to give them for the future?
Well, first thing, don't be afraid to talk about race. It's a thing we got to deal with, and there's not enough people who look like us in the press box. And it's getting better, but not enough progress. Like when I first started, I was like the only Latino looking around. It's like everybody's like a white male and over 50 years old, and that was kind of like, for me, I don't know if I call it eye-open, but it was kind of like a little uncomfortable. Like, how do I relate to these people? How can I get them to respect me and kind of, treat me, like on the same level? And one thing I learned is, like, if you act professional, they're going to treat you the same way. So, one thing I've noticed nowadays for a younger generation, and I know we got to adjust and everything is different. People like to be on Twitter, snarky, funny, making jokes to get a like or a retweet. But the way I kind of, came up in the newspaper business, just got to make your deadline, be respectful, treat people kindly. And that kind of got me in a far way. But I know you got to be very active on social media. But if you're somebody who's young, especially for people like us, we don't have the same kind of leash as other people. That's kind of sad to say. But I don't want people to be censored. Be yourself. Be who you are. Be how you were raised. But always be professional at the end of the day.
Stay professional. That's major key right there. Wise words from a wise man.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yes, sir. So now moving on to the Chargers, right? Before Tyreek Hill was traded, I remember and actually recently just subscribed, by the way, on YouTube on one of the shows that you co-host on Compass, The Beat. I hope I pronounced that right, by the way.
You got it, Compass, yeah.
Yes, sir. So before Tyreek Hill was traded, if I recall correctly, you had Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs ranked as the number 1 team in the AFC West. Now, after the trade, your rankings changed just a little bit. You had the Chargers number 1, Raiders still at 2, Chiefs now at number 3, and then the Broncos now at number 4. What do the Chargers got to do to stay atop your AFC West division rankings?
Yeah, Calvin, again, you're doing your homework, and I'm sure when you saw that video, I didn't even sound sure of myself. I'm still kind of like, I don't even know why I'm ranking these teams before the NFL draft, because things are going to change. And, if the Chiefs get a star wide receiver in the draft, like a Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson or Jameson Williams, they're going to be back to number 1 for me. They're going to be scary. But right now, if you're asking me, about these Chiefs, I think the trade for Tyreek Hill, it's going to hurt him in the short term, because you can't ask a rookie wide receiver to become Tyreek Hill in 1 year. Tyreek Hill was dynamic off the bat, but he didn't become Tyreek until like year 3. So it takes time. It's I kind of already forgot your question, but I think you were asking about my rankings, right? Or was it one something specific?
Yeah, no, I was just asking, what do the Chargers have to do to stay atop?
Yeah, and that's the one I'm kind of unsure about, because I don't like my reasoning, and that's why I kept them at I put them at number 1, the Chargers, because my reasoning is kind of dumb. I've covered this team for 4 years, and they still need to prove to me they're a consistent winner, and they haven't been doing that. When I got here in 2018, they were 12-4. They beat the Baltimore Ravens and Ricky Lamar Jackson in the wild card game. I'm like, okay, this could be a turn for this franchise. They made some noise. And then 2019, 2020, and 2021, it was the same old Chargers. Injuries, losing 1-score games, losing on field goals, and I thought last year was going to be different, because the star quarterback Justin Herbert is emerging in year 2. A brand new head coach and Brandon Staley is kind of shaking things up, and I like Brandon Staley, because he notices what's going on with the franchise for the last 60 years, and people shy away from it, like, oh, you can't call this team cursed, or yeah, injuries happen to everybody. Brandon said, no, we got to look at this. What's going on with this franchise? There is an injury problem. There is a field goal problem. There is a 1-score game problem. And that's why he was aggressive. So that, to me, kind of feel like, okay, things are changing, and I should give Brandon Staley 1 year benefit of the doubt that he'll get it figured out for year 2. So he might turn me into a believer. I'm not there yet. But if I'm going to rank a team based on paper and how the teams look today, because there's no football games, Calvin, I can't really go out there in the practice field and judge a team. So adding Khalil Mack, adding J.C. Jackson, signing interior guys like Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson. They got a veteran linebacker, Troy Reader, not too long ago. So this defense looks different. And if you have a good defense to help out Justin Herbert, it's going to look okay. So I think for right now, because of what I saw this offseason for the Chargers, they belong number 1. But I am skeptical because of what I've known from this team for the last 3 or 4 years.
Hey, Gilbert, I don't know if you know, well, you probably don't know this, but I always say this: I'm not married to my statements. I'm very fluid in my statements. And so I think you and I can relate in that regard. Speaking of defense, though, you talked about Brandon Staley. So last year, he was arguably the most aggressive head coach in football, right? And sometimes to a fault. And I guess you kind of already answered this, but do you see him scaling back on that a little bit? Or is that just who he is? And do you see him sticking to who he is?
I think he's going to stick to who he is, and to a degree, I respect that, because he came in here with the Chargers saying all the right things. So that's what we thought. Like, it sounds like what he's saying is like, oh, I wanted to hear that. But when the years started changing, he was sticking to his philosophy, not trying to say what you want to hear. Oh, like Brandon Staley was kind of like this Ted Lasso guy at the start of the year. Like, people love what he's saying. Oh, this guy gets football, new age football. He knows numbers, analytics, and so and so. And then when it came to being aggressive on 4th down, and he was missing on national TV against the Chiefs, against the Raiders, people turned on him. Like, who is this guy? Who are you to change the game of football? Who are you, this rookie head coach out of nowhere, to be aggressive and go against the norm? And as you know, Calvin, sometimes people who are aggressive and change ways and they adjust faster, those guys tend to succeed longer. So I think Brandon is thinking that way. Eventually it's going to work out. But my thing with Brandon Staley is, like, he keeps saying it worked early in the year when he beat the Chiefs and the Raiders the first time around. But every game is different. And if you're going to say, hey, it worked the first time, it's going to keep working, you got to judge it differently every single game. So when you're on a playoff race and it's Thursday Night Football and you're playing the Chiefs and you need all the points you could get, and I get it, you can't beat the Chiefs against Patrick Mahomes by trading field goals. You need touchdowns, but every game was different. That game was a kind of a close battle. So I think those field goals, and I guess with the Raiders as well, would have paid off. But it's hard to blame Brandon Staley when you have Justin Herbert. That guy is a problem on 4th down, 3rd down, whatever down it is. He's a superstar. And when you have weapons like Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, and Gerald Everett now, former Seattle tight end up there with Seahawks where you're at, Calvin. They have a bunch of guys. So I think it's going to work out.
So we were just talking about Brandon Staley, but you also talked about Sebastian Joseph Day. The Chargers have re-signed Mike Williams, Khalil Mack via trade, J.C. Jackson, 5 years, $80 million. I know there are still moves to be made. The draft, we're going to talk about the draft in just a little bit, but so far, as of April 13th, 2022, what would you grade the Chargers offseason?
You know what? I'll give it a B. It's a really good offseason, but I still see holes on the right side of the offensive line. I'm not convinced that adding Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson is going to solve their run defense problem because they were really bad a year ago stopping the run. They're lacking depth at linebacker. I know they got a Troy Reader, but it's not like a game-changing move. I think for me, if they really would have fixed that offensive line better and added more pieces up top in the front seven, I would have given it an A. But to add playmakers like last year, it was just Derwin James, and he was doing a lot of work. And obviously, Joey Bosa was there too. But when Joey Bosa is getting triple team and Derwin James is playing 5-6 roles on the defense, like those guys are going to get gas. So to add a playmaker like Khalil Mack and add another playmaker, J.C. Jackson, is going to do all the difference in the world. But if you can't stop the run, these guys aren't going to do anything. So I think if maybe Brandon sees a lot of upside in Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson to bring out the best in those guys because they are young and they have all the traits to be talented, but they're not these Pro Bowlers that these household names that of. So we'll see. It's a gamble, but hey, in the draft you get Jordan Davis, the big monster from Georgia. That's a difference maker right there. So we'll see. And then the offensive line too. You need a right tackle, you need a right guard. So I'll give it a B. It's a nice start, but they have some holes that I'm concerned about.
Well, speaking of the NFL draft, again, you probably already kind of answered this, but and like you also talked about the right side of the offensive line. I also saw that right guard, right tackle, depth at linebacker, depth at pass rusher. Is there a specific position, or are you hearing anything? Is there any sort of insight as to who the Chargers are planning on taking at 17th overall?
Yeah, if I had to give it a good guess, I think position wise, I think they're going either offensive lineman or a defensive back or like a cornerback, and that's crazy to think because they just got J.C. Jackson. They signed, they drafted Asante Samuel Jr. a year ago, so they're looking okay. But Brandon Staley keeps saying he wants more cornerbacks because you're playing Russell Wilson twice a year, you're playing Patrick Mahomes twice a year, and they recently paid Derek Carr twice a year. So the more DBs, the better. And he was out there, Brandon Staley and his crew, Ronaldo Hill, the defensive coordinator, and Derek Ansley, the DBs coach for the Chargers. They were out there at LSU Pro Day, keeping a close eye at Derek Stingley Jr. So I could definitely see DB being in play. But I think for sure right now it's going to be offensive tackle number one, and then don't count out wide receivers. I think you see a burner like the guys we mentioned, Olave or Williams, they might go after them. But I think number one, offensive tackle, Charles Cross from Mississippi. I think Mississippi State hopefully got the colleges right. This time of year, we got to remember the names of these college prospects in their schools. But if Charles Cross is there, which I don't think he will, that's definitely you got to go for him. That's like another Rashawn Slater falling to your lap. And then Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. People are saying he's probably just as good, so we'll see. But these guys, Penning and Cross and Stingley and Amasas, Garner, these guys are all like top 10 guys. And then even guys like Jameson Williams might even go on the top 15. So if you're the Chargers, what are you going to do? That's why I think I might go back to Jordan Davis and take that guy there. But I really think DB or tackle is what they're thinking for right now.
Wow. Okay. Man, imagine if you guys got a Jameson Williams. The Chargers. Oh my gosh, that offense is already stacked as is.
But they're missing a burner, so they need that.
They could definitely use that. So we're gonna pivot away from the draft, but you probably saw this already. But with news that Derek Carr is signing a 3-year, $121.5 million extension, he's now the 7th quarterback in the NFL to be making $40 million a year. Justin Herbert's a year away from being extension eligible. This is going to be a 2-part question, but do you foresee a scenario in which Justin Herbert surpasses $50 million a year? And while he's still on his rookie contract, do you think the Chargers have done enough to go all in?
The first part, I think he definitely will surpass 50 million. He deserves it. He's a, all you keep seeing his contracts keep going up and up and up. And this guy's 23 years old, so you got to pay him for what he's about to do and what he's kind of already done. So, but I don't know. Maybe he might have one of these weird contracts that are kind of team friendly, like the Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs contract. Like it was close to $500 million, but it was really spread out in 10 years, and the annual salary was a little small, and it helped out the Chiefs to be flexible. So I can see Herbert doing something like that. I don't think he seems like a guy who really needs money and needs to be flashy. He drives like a little hatchback. So he's kind of this humble, kind of old school soul. He doesn't need a lot of money. So who knows what this will happen. I don't think it's gonna be messy at all. But he needs to get what he's worth, and I think that's $50 million a year. But I expect kind of a team friendly deal. But yeah, on the whole rookie contract, pretty much the final year of the rookie contract, they're going to pay him next year, which is kind of the thinking. I think they did go all in. Maybe they could have got like a guy like a Tyrann Mathieu, a couple more veterans to kind of make it feel like it's all in. But to trade for Khalil Mack and throw money at J.C. Jackson, that to me was a big sign they're going all in. So, like I mentioned, they have some holes, but that defense was the biggest problem. And to get all the guys we've mentioned on the show on defense, I'm expecting big things for this defense. But again, if they can't stop the run, it's gonna hinder their whole year. So we'll see how that goes.
No doubt. All right, so 2 more questions here for Justin Herbert and the Chargers. I know it's early, but we've been doing a lot of things early today. So what do you think is going to be the Chargers record next season? And would you label the season as more playoffs or bust or Super Bowl or bust?
I think I'll go Super Bowl bust. It's kind of high expectation for the Chargers because like we mentioned, it's set up perfectly. The rookie deal, once you pay Justin Herbert, the money's gonna dwindle, and you won't have enough money to pay other people. And you got to pay Derwin James too. That's another guy coming up for the next offseason topic. So you got to win a Super Bowl with this, because like it doesn't happen that often when you get a star quarterback this good in a rookie deal. And you have a team that's ready to go. And I know they haven't proven it the last 3 years, but on paper, they're stacked with a lot of Pro Bowlers. So I'll say Super Bowl. And you mentioned the record was the other question. So I'm still kind of hesitant to kind of go all in for this team. I don't know if they don't really feel like a Super Bowl team for me. But I'm going to just assume they're going to do something good in the draft, and I'll give them 11 wins. It's a little safe for me, but I'll go 11 wins for them. And 11, what's the record? It's 11-7 now, right? I forget the whole weird record.
11-6.
Yeah.
11-6.
Or 11-6. Okay, there you go.
Well, they went last year was 9-8, right?
Yeah. That one extra game always throws me off.
Right. We're all still getting adjusted to that. Okay. All right. And one more question about Justin Herbert, and then we'll start to wrap things up. So Justin Herbert was one of 2 quarterbacks to throw for 5,000 yards last year alongside of Tom Brady. And all time, he's only the 9th quarterback in NFL history to throw for 5,000 yards. Assuming or seeing as how he's already shattered all expectations since being drafted out of Oregon, what can fans and what do you expect for an encore heading into his 3rd season?
Yeah, people kept asking me this question a year ago because he had such a great rookie year, and I'm like, well, he was so great. I don't know what he could work on. Right. But then you kind of get like a new coaching staff and Brandon Staley, and you start seeing the little details, and you start thinking like, wow, I didn't think about that. Like from like the playing with your like. There's like the base for the quarterback, and it's like a little small pocket. And if you kind of keep your feet set there and you make that base wider, you play composed, and you still kind of have some wiggle room to kind of move around. And those little small things, when you start because Brandon Staley is really good at kind of breaking down the little things. I started kind of noticing, his base and playing in rhythm, because these guys are making routes and you got to be in sync. So, making your first read, your second read, your third read, and usually, Herbert's pretty in sync with all his wide receivers. So, like, I think the next thing for me is maybe, knowing the system for year 2 and bringing down their interception. I think it was maybe 12 to 14 interceptions. I forgot the number, but he only had 10 his rookie year, which is crazy to think. And that's a really good number for a rookie. So if he kind of gets back down to 10 interceptions a year, Everything else is fine because you mentioned 5,000 yards over 35 passing touchdowns. So this guy's doing everything right. But if he kind of gets that speed element to his game and really use that arm a little more, because I think the coaching staff really fell in love with his accuracy. People forget how accurate this guy is. That if you go for the safe shot 5 yards, it's going to be 80% completion. So you kind of go for that. So if they kind of expand the game a little more and really kind of get aggressive, it's going to be a whole new level for Justin Herbert. But he's up there, and the biggest thing for him is making the playoffs, because you saw these young guns in the AFC quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and the NFL world was missing Justin Herbert. Like, we all want to see Justin Herbert in the playoffs. So he's got to prove he can lead a team to the playoffs. And I get it's a team game, but sometimes quarterbacks know how to will a team on their own.
But Gilbert, it's been a pleasure. But before we go, I do want to ask you one more question to wrap things up. I don't know how many times or how many years you've spent in the game, but do you have like a favorite story? Do you have a favorite athlete that you've covered? It doesn't even have to be about football. It could be about boxing as well, just because you do reporting for boxing or on boxing as well. But is there anything in particular that stands out to you throughout your career so far?
Man, that's kind of tough. Like, I was thinking the other day, I've kind of been doing this for over 10 years now. I'm counting my college years because I got a lot of experience in college. So since I was like 20 years old, so about 12, 13 years, I've been doing this now. So it's kind of tough to say, man. But, one thing that kind of stood out to me, because, it's different now the last couple of years because of COVID. You didn't get the locker room experience. And I haven't had that for a couple of years. But, not to kind of call myself versatile, but I do a little bit of everything for my newspaper. And I was covering the Angels last week, and they have open locker room. And I went in there, and you start thinking, oh, this is different. And you kind of forget about how it is to build relationships with people, because I think that's the biggest thing for me to kind of maybe give some advice. Is like getting to know these athletes away from the field or whatever, the diamond, and building relationships and getting to know them and building trust. And that's how you kind of get sources later on. You can't rush the source. You got to get that trust going. So there was a player on the Angels, and I'm kind of like a new guy looking around, trying to figure out the ways of the clubhouse. And the baseball player, Tyler Wade, he just came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm Tyler. Nice to meet you, Gilbert." And I was like, "Oh, cool." Like, athletes like that who are like kind of like laid back, make my life easier. And that to me was like, okay, cool. Makes me feel like I belong in the clubhouse. So even for me, who have been doing this for a long time, I kind of get some butterflies or nerves. So, always talk to the athletes. Don't be afraid to talk to the athletes. Like guys like Derwin James for me on the Chargers, he's been great to me. Very outspoken, honest. And if you keep it fair, they'll be honest with you. So, it's a lot. I know I'm not really answering the question, but I got a bunch of stories. And for me, I really focus on not just the X's and O's, who won the game and all that stuff, but what are your interests? What are your hobbies? What are your passions? What's your family like? How are you like? How were you raised? So just kind of living off of that kind of philosophy, I get a bunch of stories, man. So I really kind of like doing the long form stories. And then recently I've been doing the podcast, like you mentioned. You gave me the plug on Compas on the Beat. I'm getting to know people off the podcast kind of form too, and that's new for me. So it's too tough to tell which is my favorite story. But man, if you get to know these athletes away from kind of the sport, man, they're very interesting and very down to earth.
Oh, 1000%. Like you said, I was able to kind of shout out, Compas on the Beat. I also wanted to shout out, the Orange County Register, but I'm afraid that if other people were to go on the newspaper, they might run out of free articles to read, because I was trying to read your latest article, but it was telling me, oh, I got to be subscribed. And I was like, I don't mind.
You've been reading, man.
Yeah, right. And so I wanted to reference your latest article about Troy Reader, but then that's when, the whole notification kind of popped up. It's all good, though. I'll get to that sooner or later. But Gilbert, you know what they say, right? Time flies when you're having fun. And so I want to give you this opportunity to kind of plug yourself, talk about Compas on the Beat, talk about any other plugs, social medias you want to give the audience.
Yeah, for the podcast, Calvin, I think you noticed we spoke to Eric Weddle, fresh off a Super Bowl victory with the Rams, former Charger, interview on there. Check that out. I know for some Chargers fans, they have mixed feelings about Eric Weddle because it was a messy breakup, but man, he gave them the all for like 6 or 7 years. So he is a Chargers legend. So if you're a fan, give it a try, see if you like it or not. I'm not gonna force anybody to like somebody, but I think he was pretty humble to win that Super Bowl, and that was pretty cool to see. And then I'm gonna start ramping up into my draft coverage. Like I mentioned, I was doing a little bit of everything, boxing and baseball, during this offseason. But now with the draft a couple of weeks away, I'm gonna really look at who the Chargers are gonna draft, and So check out my stories at the Orange County Register, LA Daily News. Subscribe, you too, Calvin, Southern California News Group, or just follow me on Twitter, and I'm going to post them there all the time, give you updates. But like, I'm going to really dive into these tackles, DBs, wide receivers, and nose tackles. So we'll see what happens with the Chargers. But I'm ready to kind of get into the draft and dissect that all.
Yes, sir. Hey, this was a great time. Gilbert, again, thank you so much for your time. To those of you guys out there that are tuned in, this has been your host, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, with the one and only Mr. Gilbert Manzano on another edition of On Beat featuring the LA Chargers via the 32-Bit Network. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys have a lovely day. Till next time, we out.